Hi, I'm Rashonda Kay. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading House Behind the Cedars by Charles Chesnutt. We are on chapter 14, A Loyal Friend. And it's not that long of a chapter. Perhaps we will get through the whole thing. That's my goal. That's my goal. I might digress though. So, chapter 14, A Loyal Friend. Mention has been made of certain addressed envelopes. That's funny, this whole passive voice. Mention has been made of certain addressed envelopes which John Warwick, on the occasion of his visit to Patesville, had left with his illiterate mother, by the use of which she might communicate with her children from time to time. On one occasion, Miss Molly, having had a letter written, took one of these envelopes from the chest where she kept her most valued possessions, and was about to enclose the letter when someone knocked at the back door. She laid the envelope and letter on a table in her bedroom and went to answer the knock. The wind, blowing across the room through the open windows, picked up the envelope and bore it into the street. I have questions. So on one occasion, Miss Molly, having had a letter written, thought it said having had written a letter, and I was like, but she can't read and write. Okay, she had the letter written. Okay, that answers my question. I love the coincidence. She left it on the table and the wind blew it into the street. Let's keep reading. The wind, blowing across the room through the open windows, picked up the envelope and bore it into the street. Miss Molly, on her return, missed it, looked for it, and being unable to find it, took another envelope. An hour or two later, another gust of wind lifted the bit of paper from the ground and carried it into the open door of the Cooper shop. Frank picked it up and, observing that it was clean and unused, read the superscription. In his conversations with Miss Molly, which were often about Rena, the subject uppermost in both their minds, he had noted the mystery maintained by Miss Molly about her daughter's whereabouts and had often wondered where she might be. Frank was an intelligent fellow and could put this and that together. The envelope was addressed to a place in South Carolina. He was aware, from some casual remark of Miss Molly's, that Rena had gone to live in South Carolina. Her son's name was John. That he had changed his last name was more than likely. Frank was not long in reaching the conclusion that Rena was to be found near the town named on the envelope, which he carefully preserved for future reference. And why did he saw there was a letter in there? Why did he not go across the street to Miss Molly and be like, I found your letter? Anyway, for a whole year, Frank had yearned for a smile or a kind word from the only woman in the world. Peter, his father, had rallied him somewhat upon his moodiness after Rena's departure. Now's the time, boy, for you to be looking round for some nice gal of your own color. Waddle. Oh, okay. It's, sorry. It's written in dialect and I just wasn't sure what it was saying, but it's saying one that will. But Waddle appreciate you and won't be shamed of you. You're wasting time, boy, wasting time shooting at a mark out of your range. Aw, I mean, I get it, but like, shoot your shot. You don't, you miss every shot you don't take. But Frank said nothing in reply, and afterwards the old man, who was not without discernment, respected his son's mood and was silent in turn, while Frank fed his memory with his imagination and by their joint aid kept hope alive. Later, an opportunity to see her presented itself. Business in the Cooper shop was dull. A barrel factory had been opened in the town and had well nigh paralyzed the Cooper's trade. Aw, that's sad. The best mechanic could hardly compete with a machine. One man could now easily do the work of Peter's shop. An agent appeared in town seeking laborers for one of the railroads which the newly organized carpetbag governments were promoting. Upon inquiry, Frank learned that their destination was near the town of Clarence, South Carolina. He promptly engaged himself for the service and was soon at work in the neighborhood of Warwick's home. There he was employed steadily until a certain holiday, upon which a grand tournament was advertised to take place in a neighboring town. Work was suspended, and foremen and laborers attended the festivities. Well, now we know how Frank ended up at the whatever that was that Rena became the queen of beauty and light. Frank had surmised that Rena would be present on such an occasion. He had more than guessed, too, that she must be looked for among the white people rather than among the black. Hence the interest with which he had scanned the grandstand. The result has already been recounted. He had recognized her sweet face. He had seen her enthroned among the proudest and best. He had witnessed and gloried in her triumph. He had seen her cheek flushed with pleasure, her eyes lit up with smiles. He had followed her carriage, had made the acquaintance of Mimey the nurse, and had learned all about the family. When finally he left the neighborhood to return to Patesville, he had learned of Tryon's attentions and had heard the servants gossip with reference to the marriage, of which they knew the details long before the principals had approached the main fact. Frank went away without having received one smile or heard one word from Rena, but he had seen her. She was happy. He was content in the knowledge of her happiness. She was doubtless secure in the belief that her secret was unknown. Why should he, by revealing his presence, sow the seeds of doubt or distrust in the garden of her happiness? He sacrificed the deepest longing of a faithful heart and went back to the cooper shop, lest perchance she might accidentally come upon him some day and suffer the shock which he had sedulously spared her. I wouldn't want to scare her, he mused, or make her feel bad, and that's what I'd most likely do if she seed me. She'll be better off with me out in the road. She'll marry that rich white gentleman. He won't never know the difference, and be a white lady as she would have been if some old witch hadn't changed her in her cradle. What? If some old witch hadn't changed her in her cradle? I mean, I guess it's just a saying, but yeah. But maybe sometime she'll remember the little nigger what used to nuss her when she was a child and fished her out in the old canal and would have died for her if he would have done any good. That's so sad. Very generously, too, and with a fine delicacy, he said nothing to Miss Molly of having seen her daughter, lest she might be disquieted by the knowledge that he shared the family secret. No great mystery now, this pitiful secret, but more far reaching in its consequences than any blood curdling crime. The taint of black blood was the unpardonable sin, from the unmerited penalty of which there was no escape except by concealment. Let's read that again. The taint of black blood was the unpardonable sin, from the unmerited penalty of which there was no escape except by concealment. The worst thing you could be was black. The best thing you could do was conceal it. And concealment clearly wasn't open to everyone. Like, I'm light skinned, but concealment isn't even open to me. I'll keep reading. If there be a dainty reader of this tale who scorns a lie, and who writes the story of his life upon the sleeve for all the world to read, let him uncurl his scornful lip and come down from the pedestal of superior morality to which assured position and wide opportunity have lifted him, and put himself in the place of Rena and her brother, upon whom God had lavished his best gifts, and from whom society would have withheld all that made these gifts valuable. So we have to ask, which are the best gifts God lavished on Warwick and Rena? They seem like good, smart people. So, in some sense, those are the good gifts God lavished on them. But he also lavished on them the good gift of white skin. And it says, and from whom society would have withheld all that made these gifts valuable. If they didn't have their white skin, broad society would not have appreciated their good gifts. You can be smart and kind and good and be black. Absolutely. Millions of people are. But in the context of what was deemed good in this society, those gifts couldn't be used to full effect if you didn't have white skin. I disagree with that. I think Black people could and did very amazing things, like write this book, like show Black people have good gifts and we're using them. Like, I like the tension that's between what the book is saying as a reflection of the time in which it was written and the fact that a Black person wrote the book and was using the good gifts lavished on him by God. All right. Okay, we've got two pages left. We can do this. We can do this. To undertake what they tried to do required great courage. Had they possessed the sneaking, cringing, treacherous character traditionally ascribed to people of mixed blood, the character which the blessed institutions of a free slaveholding republic had been well adapted to foster among them, had they been selfish enough to sacrifice to their ambition the mother who gave them birth, society would have been placated or humbugged, and the voyage of their life might have been one of unbroken smoothness. Had they possessed, okay, were they sneaky, treacherous people, their lives probably would have been fine. Had they been selfish enough to never want to talk to their mother again, they would have been fine. But apparently they weren't. When Rena came back unexpectedly at the behest of her dream, Frank heard again the music of her voice, felt the joy of her presence and the benison of her smile. There was, however, a subtle difference in her bearing. Her words were not less kind, but they seemed to come from a remoter source. She was kind as the sun is warm or the rain refreshing. She was especially kind to Frank because he had been good to her mother. If Frank felt the difference in her attitude, he ascribed it to the fact that she had been white, that she had been white, that she had passed as white, not that she was currently white, and had taken on something of the white attitude toward the Negro. And Frank, with an equal unconsciousness, clothed her with the attributes of the superior race. Did Frank really think it was a superior race? Maybe. I hope not, but maybe. Only her drop of Black blood he conceived gave him the right to feel toward her as he would never have felt without it. And if Rena guessed her faithful devotee's secret, the same reason saved his worship from presumption. A smile and a kind word were little enough to pay for a life's devotion. Oh, oh, oh. A smile and a kind word were little enough to pay for a life's devotion. I mean, but is he really devoted to her? Does he really know her? Like, he seems to know the idea of her. I mean, but did they have a true sort of relationship, or was he just pining after her? And is that devotion, or is that something different? On the third day of Rena's presence in Patesville, Frank was driving up Front Street in the early afternoon when he nearly fell off his cart in astonishment as he saw seated in Dr. Green's buggy, which was standing in front of the Patesville Hotel, the young gentleman who had won the prize at the tournament and who, as he had learned, was to marry Rena. Frank was quite certain that she did not know of Tryon's presence in town. Frank had been over to Miss Molly's in the morning and had offered his services to the sick woman, who had rapidly become convalescent upon her daughter's return. Miss Molly had spoken of some camphor that she needed. Frank had volunteered to get it. Rena had thanked him and had spoken of going to the drugstore during the afternoon. It was her intention to leave Patesville on the following day. If that man sees her in this town, said Frank to himself, there'll be trouble. She don't know he's here, and I'll bet he don't know she's here. Then Frank was assailed by a very strong temptation. If, as he surmised, the joint presence of the two lovers in Patesville was a mere coincidence, a meeting between them would probably result in the discovery of Rena's secret. If she's found out, argued the tempter, she'll come back to her mother, and you can see her every day. But Frank's love was not of the selfish kind. And I would say true love is never of the selfish kind. Even though I question his devotion to her, love is not selfish. If it's selfish, it's not love. He put temptation aside and applied the whip to the back of his mule with a vigor that astonished the animal and moved him to unwonted activity. In an unusually short space of time, he drew up before Miss Molly's back gate, sprang from the cart, and ran up to Miss Molly on the porch. "Is Miss Rena here?" he demanded breathlessly. "No, Frank. She went up to town about an hour ago to see the doctor and get me some camphor gum." Oh, Frank muttered a groan, rushed from the house, sprang into the cart, and goaded the terrified mule into a gallop that carried him back to the market house in half the time it had taken him to reach Miss Molly's. "I wonder what in the world's the matter with Frank," mused Miss Molly in vague alarm. "If he hadn't been in such a hurry, I'd have asked him to read Judge Straight's letter, but Rena'll be home soon." When Frank reached the doctor's office, he saw Tryon seated in the doctor's buggy, which was standing by the window of the drugstore. Frank ran upstairs and asked the doctor's man if Miss Walden had been there. "Yes," replied Dave. "She was here a little while ago and said she was going downstairs to the drugstore and wouldn't be surprised if you didn't find her there now." Woo-wee. I'm a little stressed about what's happening here. We made it through this whole chapter. Good for us. I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda.